Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 111 of the Dynasty Junkies podcast. It's your host, Andrew Hall at Andrew Hall FF. With me tonight in the B chair, we've got Scott Sidlow. How are you tonight, Scott?
What's up, Andrew? It's good to be back. My voice is doing pretty okay here, so that's a good thing. I was really hoping, they told me you might have a little voice change, so I was really hoping to be a little deeper and sexier, but we'll just have to see how it comes through on the other end. But yeah, man, we got a full slate of full slate for college anyway. We got a bunch of college games on tonight. Now that I'm in all these Devi and C2C leagues, it's pretty exciting stuff, man. So, and yeah, we got a great guest tonight too, a returning guest, somebody who's been on many times. We love this dude, and it's gonna be a great show tonight.
That's right. Scott, without any further ado, we got Andrew Cooper. Go ahead, Coop. Say hi to Scott.
I was gonna say, Scott, your voice is sounding sexy, dude. So whatever you've been doing, not sure if you have a cold or whatever, dude. Nice and smoky, man. You sound like Pharrell on the bench out here, dude.
Let's go, right,
baby. I'm liking it, dude. I'm liking it.
That's right. Well,
sorry to interrupt my own intro, but
you're fine. No, it's fine. We got Andrew Cooper. Got Andrew Cooper at Coop A Fiasco from Fantasy Alarm, and you got a new deal you're doing with Better Fantasy. You were telling us a little bit about that before we started recording. What's going on with that?
Yeah, man. So I do all my regular videos, articles, everything. That's all at Fantasy Alarm. It's always going to be. But a guy from formerly of SiriusXM, Matt Deutsch, started his own network, Better Sports, Bettor. And essentially what it is, it's like its own radio station where you download the app and there's video that goes along with it, right? We got the morning show from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's me, and the two Front Yard Fantasy guys, Simon and JL. If you know them, you know them. They're amazing dudes, hilarious. And we have our own show. It's great, and we're giving away stuff every day. Like we're giving jerseys away every day through the app. There's two buttons. One that's called the fun button that you just press. If we have a giveaway, sometimes we just do it at the press of that button. We give stuff away. Other times you can call in. We have people on the show to do different games with us. Like we've been doing, Poll Perception, Jeopardy, all these games with people. It's so much fun. And we're giving away jerseys every day. So if you get in there tomorrow, you'll get a chance to win one. We've given away an autographed Ben Coates, an autographed Chris Johnson, CJ2K, autographed Devontae Adams, Dante Culpepper. Like they're hooking us up. It's a real deal. So yeah, come join us over there, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's a lot of fun. And the other shows are awesome too. Like we got Nando Defino from CBS, like a ton of great shows. So
Moose and Keith, like anybody who knows XM radio is going to know these names. Corey Parson and Joe Dolan. You cannot miss Joe Dolan's voice. Everybody knows Joe Dolan's voice. Kyle Elfrink and Ray Flowers from Fantasy Guru. I've been listening to those guys for a decade. Like it's so awesome that they're on there.
Crazy lineup.
Well, I just downloaded the app. I'll have to take care of that after the show. I don't want to get too distracted here. But no, that's awesome. That's such a nice little twist, I guess, on the usual. You're just writing articles, and then now you're on a live show every day for 3 hours with some great people. That's just wow, what a twist, what a turnout. So awesome to hear that. Anything else you got going on?
Yeah, I mean, like, so with Fantasy Alarm, we still have the show on Fantasy Alarm SiriusXM. I'm just a guest on there from time to time, but always check out the stuff that we have going on there. And our draft guide at Fantasy Alarm is free this year. So if you like the things you hear on this show, go to Fantasy Alarm, pull up the ultimate cheat sheet. All my rankings are in there. They're called the dynamic rankings in there, and it's free. I mean, like, I don't know what else to tell you. Free. Is there anything better than free? I mean, I guess
I don't think so. We're
doing that on the other show.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want free stuff, come over to if you want us to actually give you things, come to the Better Sports Network. If you want the rankings for free, come to Fantasy Alarm. It's all free this year. We're just giving it away.
That's phenomenal. That's great. All right. Well, and if you're watching live, I don't know if we have anybody really yet watching live. We've got a couple maybe here and there, but I am wearing the Manscaped shirt tonight because tonight is our first episode sponsored by Manscaped.
Officially
support for the Dynasty Junkies. That's right. Support for the Dynasty Junkies is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in the men's below-the-waist grooming. Their products are precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. I love that rhyme. Manscaped's Performance Package, the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Join over 6 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off and free shipping worldwide with the code JUNKIES at manscaped.com. So make sure that you get over there. You check this out. We got to get some people that are signing up for this. Okay. We got to show that we actually have a force. Go buy some stuff for your balls. And again, if there's 6 million men, that's 12 million balls. Let's be clear. We got to keep going with this a little bit. The Performance Package 4.0 has arrived, and oh man, is it a game changer. Inside this package, you'll find their Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, performance boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold all your goodies. I got my goodie bag. Scott, did you get yours?
I have not got it yet. It's on the way.
Oh, I'll be honest, it is a game changer. There's a lot of stuff in this thing. It is a terrific value. I was surprised. And I'll be honest, I have used it. Phenomenal. I will just say that. Phenomenal. Really good. Really good job.
You get a goodie bag for your goodie bag. That's
right. You get a goodie bag for your bags. That's right. Well put, Coop. That's exactly right. Well, this trimmer is waterproof too, so you don't have to stand in, like, over the trash can and be awkward. You can use it in the shower and be nice and discreet about it. It's 4th generation trimmer, features a cutting edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents, and it totally works. I'll just say that. Lawnmower 4.0, like I said, is waterproof. Also has a 4000K LED spotlight, which is clutch and does come in handy because there's not a lot of light down there, boys. Let's be serious. But because it's, like I said, because it's waterproof, you can get rid of that mess on your floor. You're good to go with all that. And I'll be honest too, like, even the shirt is comfortable. The boxer is comfortable. I'm not showing those off. But honestly, well done, Manscaped. You did a terrific job with this package. Again, make sure you go to manscaped.com, use the code Junkies at checkout. You get 20% off with free shipping. And again, the code Junkies for all you DAP Network fans out there. What a world we're living in, Scott. We're sponsored. It's finally time.
You know, and I just want to say this was a group decision that we had kind of talked about this in the past. Like, if we ever got to the point where we were lucky enough to get a sponsor, we don't mind being sellouts just for the fun of it. No. But also, honestly, we had to use the product and know what it is and actually something that we stand behind. I mean, they'd have to actually pay us a lot of money to talk about something we hate, but we might still consider that. But we did come to a group decision and say that this is a product we all use. We all have them and we all use it. Yep. So, hey, I don't know what better, is there a better product to see, whatever we use? Hey,
exactly, guys. And take care of your boys here, right? Take care of your boys down here. Take care of your boys on the show. Get a goodie bag for your bag, right? And use promo code Junkies and get some stuff to take care of your junk. This is what you guys got to do out here. Whether it's the first date, second date, third date, you got to be ready to rock and roll. Oh man, my dude. Always. There's nothing worse than, if first date comes around, you don't think it's going to happen and you didn't get the Manscaped going. Forget it, bro.
It used to be so taboo. Now it's like a given. Like, it's just, I love that we've come so full circle. So again, use that code Junkies at checkout at manscaped.com, 20% off and free shipping. So again, with that, let's move into the actual meat and two buns of the show. We're talking about tight ends tonight. We talked about the front. Now we're going to the tight ends on the back, I guess. Let's call it that direction. This is what we're doing tonight.
Thursday.
This is why we brought you on, Cooper, is because we know you like to talk about them tight ends. You know what I'm saying? You're a big fan of those tight ends. So I think it makes total sense that we talk about this. But before we get into it too deep, I do want to make sure that people understand the reason that you're on. One of the reasons that you're on, obviously, is that we're a big fan of yours. But you talk tight ends a lot. You have a lot of good research that you've done on tight ends. I know you've written an epitome, I will say, like some crazy long article that you've written at Fantasy Alarm that I read every year. I bookmark it and I always reference it back. Give people a little bit of a rundown of what it is, I guess, that you do and what you like about tight ends, what you've researched, just to highlight real quick before we get into this.
Yeah. So for years, I've been tracking it, got the spreadsheets, everything going. I've been writing this series, the Ultimate Tight End Guide. This year, it's 4 parts. There's the first article. If you're a savvy gamer, and if you're listening to this show, you obviously are, because this show gets deep, it gets wild. Right. So if you read that first article, it'll give you all the info you need to make your own decisions. Right. So you really only need that one first article. It gives you the full breakdown of how to identify elite tight ends. It's pinned on my profile at Coupe Fiasco. The next 3 articles are for this season. Right. That other one's evergreen. It'll help you no matter what. The next 3 are who's elite this year, who to fade this year. And then my third article is the fan favorite, the yin and yang tight end, which is a tight end pairing system.
Yeah, baby.
That we can get into. If you want me to explain it now quick, or we can get into it when we get to redraft, it's your call, Andrew.
Let's talk about the dynasty aspect of it first. We are a dynasty show. We'll pivot into redraft as we get into the yin and yang more, but then we'll obviously pull back and do ADP.
That is a worthy discussion. So
yeah, the yin and yang, I think, is something. The yin and yang is something I like to discuss, and I even like to think about it more myself, but I love hearing you talk about it because I love the way you put it together. And this was your own idea, right? You kind of built this from scratch. I don't think you took this from anyone else. Am I right?
Yeah. So it's basically, it's one of those strategies that everyone's kind of done on their own. Like, whether you did it on purpose or not, you might have done something similar, but I refined it to a very specific type of strategy, and even to go after specific targets. So, and we got to talk Dynasty because this is the Dynasty show, but it's also
Right.
September 1st right now, right? Like
That's
it
right.
is. We are in the can.
week away.
Is
Go
lit,
time.
baby.
Yes.
1 week away. So let's start with some Dynasty, and then we'll hit the redraft for everybody who maybe hasn't done their draft yet coming up.
Yeah. So,
What do you mean?
and maybe just to help us out though, this yin and yang thing, you mentioned it before, and I want to make sure that we dive in a little on the Dynasty side first. Like there are studs. There's what, 4 or 5 studs. I think you kind of call out, maybe 6. I think it was actually. There's a few of those guys at the top that are kind of like set it and forget it. You don't need to worry about it. But then after that, it gets really messy. So how do you define yin and yang? And then what's kind of your thought process? If you don't get one of those studs, what do you like to do with those later guys?
Yeah, so for Dynasty, I don't quite go yin and yang. That's more of a straight redraft strategy. For Dynasty, I have a very specific strategy. If I had to put it on a poster note and give it to you, I could do that, and this is what it would read. It would say roster talent, start opportunity. And that's
Ooh.
how I approach Dynasty. When I'm doing my startup draft, I decide, you got to decide if you're playing to win now or not, right? And if you are playing to win now, you need a guy that has the opportunity, because the tight end position is unique in that you have guys that are asked to block a ton if the scheme isn't right. And you have guys who are stuck behind other tight ends, and you have guys who are stuck behind multiple great pass catchers. So you could have guys that have all the talent they need to be successful, but the window of opportunity isn't open yet to start them in your league. The best example of all time of that is Delaney Walker. This is a guy who, for 7 years, was stuck behind Vernon Davis, who had arguably the best combine of all. I mean, do you guys? In my opinion, he had the best tight end combine of all time, right?
He broke it. Yeah, it was too obvious. Yeah.
Maybe of any position. Like, he was just an absolute horse out there.
Freak.
And Delaney Walker, they convinced him to sign a second contract. So he was stuck for 7 years. At age 30, he finally went to another team, to the Titans, and he was a top 5 tight end 3 years in a row. His very first year there, I think he was tight end 2 or something, with Marcus Mariota and Arthur Smith. And we've also seen it with Dallas Goedert, right? Where Dallas Goedert is a better blocker. Even if he's just as good of a catcher as Zach Ertz, he was forced in line, and Ertz got to play the slot role. So you have to roster the talent. You want to hold on to those guys, but you need to start opportunity when you're trying to win. So that's the saying that I always keep in the back of my mind, is to roster talent, start opportunity. And if I ever get a guy that I think either doesn't have the talent or the window is too far away, I trade him.
No, it's a smart move. Yeah, and I love that idea too of just rostering talent in Dynasty in general, right? Like that applies to all positions. It's such an easy, simple kind of cheat sheet kind of way to put it too, because I think in Dynasty a lot of times there are a lot of people that look at their lineup and saying, well, I want the best lineup. You got to have depth. You got to have some players that are, because Dynasty rosters are almost always 25, 30, 40 people. You got to have plenty of players on your bench that are willing to get in there. And then if they get the opportunity, their talent can shine. And I think that's where I love that logic.
Yeah. And with wide receiver, though, the thing is, it's a lot easier for the talent to shine at wide receiver because most teams are using 3 of them. So if you're one of the 3 guys out there and you're good, then it's easy, right? But if you're a tight end, you might not be out there every play. There might be, multiple good wide receivers out there that are just better pass catchers. But it does apply to other positions like Chris Godwin, for instance, stuck behind Deshaun Jackson and Adam Humphries and Mike Evans. And when he did get the window of opportunity, he crushed. So it does apply to other positions, but tight end is unique in that you can have a guy who is highly talented and just it's not the right situation. Right.
Well, so let's talk about redraft then, obviously, with your yin and yang. And this is where Dynasty becomes redraft. There's an overlap, obviously. All of us Dynasty players are trying to build this amazing roster and rostering talent and starting opportunity. It's a terrific way to put it. But you still need to make those lineup decisions. You still need to decide who is going to go in my lineup for this week. In almost every league that I play in, there's still those decisions. You get down, you're starting 10, 11, 12 players, and that 11th, 12th player, you're like, man, who do I put in my flex right here, right? Is it a tight end and tight end premium, or do I go with a receiver? Do I go with a running back? So I think this is where a lot of the yin and yang stuff can really come in handy, because especially with tight ends, when there's such a drop-off after the first, 6 studs, after that, it's really kind of up in the air. How do you play that in redraft then? And how can we, apply that in Dynasty?
Yeah. So I can give you the cheat sheet here verbally of how you approach your league. And then you can go to my Twitter. And if you just search @Coupe Fiasco Yin and Yang, the cheat sheet will come up. It's also in our rankings at Fantasy Alarm, but you can find it right on my Twitter too. And here's what I do. The first thing I do is I look at my settings. Do I have enough bench space to roster 2 tight ends or not? If I don't, then I prioritize getting a top tight end, because there's some leagues where you have 4 bench spots. You just can't, as much as I love tight ends, I'm not using one of my 4 bench spots on the tight end, because in a league like that, every time you have a defense hitting a bye week, if your defense and your quarterback hit the same bye week, you need to drop your half your bench, 2 out of 4 guys, right? So like you can't do it. But if you have a league with 5 or 6 or 7 bench spots, which I would petition any Dynasty player or guys that listen to this podcast to do, because you have all the coordinates, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, not utilizing all the great info. Andrew Hall is going to tell you about the RB 60, and then you're going to have a format where you only have 4 bench spots. No, dude, put it to a vote. Get that juiced up. Now, if you can roster an extra guy, then this is what I do. If you can't get one of the top 5 guys, I wait and I take 2. And the yin yang is Yin is a safe player that has a low ceiling, but a guy you can start early and trust. And then the Yang is your second tight end that you draft later, that all you care about is upside. You throw the floor out the window. Who cares about floor? He's on your bench. And if he blows up, he goes in your lineup. So examples of Yin tight ends would be Dalton Schultz, with Michael Gallup starting banged up, right? You can start him, trust him early, but his ceiling might be capped. TJ Hawkinson, right? With Jamison Williams on IR, and then he comes back. Or the primo one is Zach Ertz, right? With DeAndre Hopkins, he's out for 6 weeks. You can trust Zach Ertz for those 6 weeks. Down the stretch could be a little dicey. Then on the flip side, you just go for anyone you think could be a top 2 target on their team, or that meets all the criteria that's in that series there. And it's whoever you think. Like, you read my article and find the concepts, and then use it in your own projections. If you think it's Cole Kmet being a top 2 target on his team, if you think it's Hunter Henry, who was a top 2 target on his team last year, Logan Thomas, David Njoku, I like Evan Engram. He could lead his team in targets. Be creative. Use your imagination and use the concepts and do it your way. You can use my rankings because I'm awesome at this. So those are always gonna give you a good guide. True. But that's why I love coming on the show, because I'm talking to actual sharp fantasy gamers, right? So I tell the people that are sharp, don't listen to me, listen to you, right? And
you've done more research on this than I have. That's why I love talking to you too. It's the same logic. Like, we're all smart in different ways, right? Scott's a portfolio player. He's got 50 teams. He sees things, days ahead of what I would see it, because
he's looking in the Matrix like Neo.
Exactly.
Right? Like, it's all ones and zeros over there. Yeah.
But then when you're you're knee deep, even like just, I don't know, shoulder deep in tight end into stuff, you know what I mean? Like, you're all the way in there. Like, you're getting all the way up in the tight ends. You know what I'm saying? Like, but like you're just doing so much research. You're doing so much research that I just don't have time to do. And like, I love the way that you simplify it down and kind of make it digestible, because again, tight ends can be kind of frustrating, right? I think anybody who's in a dynasty league, but anybody who's ever played fantasy, I'm sure has had a time where they go, God, I really wish I had a stud tight end. I really wish I had Travis Kelce or, anybody like Delaney Walker or those other guys too for years, right? And then how frustrating is it to be like, I don't have one of those and I'm screwed. Well, you got to find another way.
Exactly. And that's why it's like, you have the safe guy, the Zach Ertz. He's in your lineup, right? And this strategy, it works just like zero RB in reality,
right?
Because you have the guy that you can start week 1, and then say you draft Evan Engram, and then he comes out as your Yang tight end, and he comes out, he only plays 50% of the snaps. He's not running a lot of routes. He gets like 2 targets. Well, I'm going to be updating the rankings every single week with the guys that did go out and play 90% of the snaps and run 30 routes and didn't block on a single pass play. And that's how we found Logan Thomas. That's how we found Mark Andrews, Darren Waller, right? And the reason you draft 2 is people will come to me and they'll say, oh, I read a gas station magazine in 2005 and it said you should never draft a second tight end ever, never, right? Or like, never draft 2 quarterbacks. And I say, okay, you sit there and never draft 2 quarterbacks. And I'll sit there, and if I wait on quarterback, I'll take a shot on a young quarterback that's going quarterback 15 as my second tight end in 2018, and maybe I get Patrick Mahomes. He throws 50 touchdown passes. That's right. Or I take a Mark Andrews, right? If you look at it, every year for the past 5 years, a tight end has come from outside of the top 17 in ADP to finish top 5.
We were just talking about that before we started recording, how you never know who it could be. Like, we think we know, we think we're smart. and then every year we're dumb, right?
Mhm.
It's just that's how it is.
That's why it's got to be like zero RB. They come out of nowhere. Last year was Dalton Schultz. The year before that, Logan Thomas, right? Logan Thomas was tight end like 37 in ADP, dude. Converted quarterback. The year before that, it was Darren Waller and Mark Andrews. That was a killer year for the strategy. That was the year that put this strategy on the map because I was writing. I'm drafting Mark Andrews in every league. I don't care if I take Travis Kelce at tight end 1. I'm taking Mark Andrews later on because I believe in his situation.
Well, he was free. He was such a late round. It's like, why not take a chance? He's got that upside. I love it. Yep.
Yeah. The year before that is the one that people forget about. Do you remember who it was? It was 2000.
Was it Kittle before that?
So no, so Kittle was being drafted the year he went big. He was being drafted within the top. I think it was like 14
Waller
or something.
Oh, okay.
It was the year before Waller and Andrews.
Oh, before
he got there
Waller,
via touchdowns, ton of touchdowns. And I'll give you a hint. He got there via touchdowns from a quarterback who retired early.
Jared Cook.
Ooh.
Not Jared Cook.
Oh,
what's the
Andrew Luck and Jack Doyle?
Yeah, there it.
Or no, not Jack Doyle.
The other guy. I'm drawing a blank. Go
tough,
ahead,
man.
Andrew. Tell us who it is.
Flamed out. He flamed out from the Lions and
Yep.
went to the Colts. Then he
him.
went to the Steelers. Yeah, you can see it right now. Eric Ebron.
There it is.
13 touchdowns with Andrew Luck that year, which is just ridiculous, dude. Right?
Come on.
And then, of course, the year before that, it was Evan Ingram finishing top 5 with Eli Manning, the last year Eli Manning really played. So those guys are coming out of the woodwork. We're going to find them, right?
No, and that's exactly the right way to play this too. And I know we're a Dynasty podcast. We're going to dive into some of the Dynasty ADP and stuff like that. But I do think it's good to hit on some of that redraft strategy because a lot of us are playing redraft leagues also. And not only that, but we might have a time where we can trade for a Yang tight end for dirt cheap in our Dynasty league and like send a third for one of these Yang guys that you think might have a flyer upside. And that's someone that we can get and then, pivot off that value later and get a good value bump as they start to do well. So I like to look at it through both lenses in a way and just say, all right, well, these are obviously, I'm in a bunch of redraft leagues, as many as Dynasty is this point, charity leagues and best balls and all this. There's all these different leagues going on, and it's never a bad idea to learn another league and learn another format, learn another scoring setting and all that. So that's why I love kind of getting outside the box, especially when it comes to tight end, where you can really make a difference in a way that is it's unnatural. It's not every league, not every team is going to have an amazing tight end. There's only 5 of them or so. So you got to differentiate if you're one of the other 7 teams in the league. So I love that logic.
The mind-blowing thing that you tell people is they say, if you're in a 10 or 12 team league that starts one tight end, right? If your tight end isn't top 5 or 6, you have a below average tight end. You have a positional disadvantage, right? So you always want to strive for that. And even with Dynasty, that first article series there, the first one of the series that talks about what makes an elite tight end, that all that tells you for Dynasty is how to recognize when the window will be open, whether it's this year or next year, whether guys' contracts are coming up, right? Like it'll help you project when that window does open for your guy.
And that's really well put. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of strategy in tight end, and we'll get into more of that as we get through this, obviously. But we want to get pivoted in the next segment here. We're going to talk about ADP. And what we're going to be using here is the same thing we've done the last few episodes. If you've been listening along, we do our positional series. This is the tight end roundup. So we're talking about the top 12 tight ends in August ADP on DLF using their Superflex ADP. But again, you just put it perfectly. Like after the first 5, and I would even say 5 in this league is kind of, 5 in Dynasty is where we are. After that, it drops off. And then there's, I don't know, a big puddle of 20 different tight ends that could all be worth starting and depending on how you want to bend the logic, right? So if you don't have one of those top 5 guys, you're hoping for upside to get in that top 5. So before we get too deep, I want to make sure I cover what these 12 tight ends are. This is, again, the latest ADP from DLF. These are what we would consider the most accurate, in a sense, ADP, the livest ADP we have. Tight end 1, Kyle Pitts. I know John Bosch is excited somewhere. Tight end 2, Mark Andrews. 3, Travis Kelce. 4, George Kittle. 5, Darren Waller. Huge tier break, in my opinion. Tight end 6, TJ Hawkinson. 7, Dalton Schultz. 8, Dallas Goedert. 9, Zach Ertz. 10, Pat Freiermuth. 11, Cole Kmet. And then rounding up the top 12 is tight end 12, Dawson Knox. Now, these are all tight ends that I think I have at least one share of everybody on this list across my Dynasty leagues, just because I like to diversify. I know Scott's kind of got me on that a little bit too with the portfolio play. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. But I'll be honest, I feel much more confident when I'm dealing with guys like Pitts, Andrews, and Kelce. I don't have to worry about that set anymore. I can just set it and forget it at tight end. I guess the first thing we usually ask here is who in the current top 12, who of these guys will not be there next year? And Cooper, I want to start with you. I know, again, you've done some research on this. We were talking about risers and trying to find guys that'll jump in, but also noticing when to get out is very important. Who of these 12, I guess, are you looking at, I don't know, selling in Dynasty, or someone you think, a year from now won't be there?
So like to get real meta with the yin and yang strategy, with the whole Zach Ertz plan, right? Like Zach Ertz, where you use him for the first 6 weeks, it's almost like you picture it like a rocket ship where he's the boosters that get you going. And then when DeAndre Hopkins comes back, the boosters kind of fall back to earth. Yep. I think that people are going to realize that. And next year, when things come around again, and it is Hopkins and it's Marquise Brown, and maybe Rondale Moore takes a step forward, now he has virtually no shot to be a top 2 target on the team. And given his lack of speed, like Ertz is always he's always been a death by 1,000 cuts type player, right? Like he needs those targets because he doesn't have the breakaway speed. He scores the touchdowns. He's all targets and touchdowns, right? Not a lot of yak. That's why he's never been the tight end 1. He's been tight end 2, 3, 4, 6, but he's never been the tight end 1 because he just doesn't have that extra yak. Like he's never going to have 80-yard touchdown like George Kittle does, right? So for me, I think Zach Ertz is the guy that falls out. And then Dallas Goedert is another one where talk about, like, when I talk about the window, talk about the shortest window ever being open, right? Like an angel came down from the heavens and scooped up Zach Ertz and moved him to a bird team on the other side of the country, right? And you were like, oh my God, it's happening, right? Like what is that? Like the Ron Paul, it's happening meme, you know what I mean? It's like, it's happening. And it did happen and he was pretty good, right? And then the next offseason, they go out and trade for AJ Brown. And now it's for you to like Dallas Goedert. And I'm not saying you can't. Like my thing is always use the concepts and apply them to your own projections. So if you think Dallas Goedert gets more targets than AJ Brown and or Devonta Smith, then you should like Dallas Goedert. I personally think that the top 2 targets on the team are AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. The reason that it becomes problematic is that when you look at a team, the last team to have 2 top 24 wide receivers and a top 5 tight end, it was the 2013 Denver Broncos. Do you guys remember how many touchdown passes Peyton Manning threw that year?
Like 48 or something crazy.
55. He set the record that year. So like, and the closest we've come to that is, people point at, they say, oh, what about Tom Brady and the Buccaneers last year where they had, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Gronk. And Gronk was tight end 7, which I mean, isn't even that great for your, tight end 7 means you have a below average tight end. But people forget that Tom Brady led the league in attempts and yards and touchdowns. So put it this way. If both those dudes are wide receiver 2s and Dallas Goedert is a top 5 tight end, then you don't even need to worry about those players because whoever has Jalen Hurts already won the league, right? Like he already won because if he's throwing, the he's touchdowns needed, and he's rushing like that, like, who can we might not even, it might ruin the industry if he throws 50 touchdown passes and runs for 10.
God,
you know what I mean?
Dynasty managers everywhere would freak out. The sell-off would be crazy. The value would be through the roof. He'd be 101 in Superflex over Josh Allen. It could be crazy.
It would ruin everything. It. So like, I don't even want that to happen. It's
Rocky
like rooting for the apocalypse.
We'd have to listen to that every week,
Rocky would love it and hate it at the same time. But I think you're hitting on something. You kind of mentioned it here, and I want to make sure we zoom in a little further on this. One of the things that I know that you talk about a lot is the fact that you want a tight end that's a top 2 target on the team, right? Yeah. You don't want to take a tight end that's like the 3rd or 4th or 5th option, like Hayden Hurst, prime case for someone you don't technically want to start unless all the things have fallen off, right? Hayden Hurst for the Bengals is maybe the 5th target on that team. That's not someone you're looking at. No one is predicting a Hayden Hurst outbreak here, right? But you're looking at Kyle Pitts, number 1 target. Mark Andrews, number 1 target. Travis Kelce, number 1 target. George Kittle, 1 or 2. And that's, again, there's a tier break there. You got Debo maybe, right? And then you got Darren Waller. I think with Devontae, that obviously he's top 2, but he's not 1 anymore. And then Hawkinson, Amon-Ra is taken off. So a lot of these guys in that top area it's pretty clear. But then after that, it hits a cliff because even Zach Ertz, he might be the top target for the first 6 weeks, like you said. But after that, it gets tricky.
Scary, brother. It's scary. And that's when we get into, the next area. I don't want to do all the talking, but like, I'll give it real quick. The main stat that gives it to you, you know what I mean? Is that going back to 2003, Randy McMichael is the last time we had a guy
Dolphins?
finish in the top 5 in PPR with less than 90 targets and less than 10 touchdowns. There's 2 paths. You either need 90 targets or 10 touchdowns. And when I've looked at them all, I went through by hand painstakingly. It actually wasn't that hard. There's only
You enjoyed it. Come on.
over, it's like, I think it's like 80 guys, right? That finished top 5 over, 18 years or whatever it is. Here's the breakdown. Guys that finished there with both over 90 targets and touchdowns. 18. So we're talking Travis Kelce, 10 touchdowns, whatever, and 90 targets.
20 something percent. Yeah.
Yeah. Guys that finished
in
there.
what period of time?
Going back to 2003. So all the time.
Almost 20 years.
All the time that matters, Scott, right? Like
Yeah.
all the, yeah. So you have guys that finished top 5. 18 of those guys had both over 90 targets and double-digit touchdowns. Guys that had over 90 targets and less than 10 touchdowns to finish top 5, 67 of them.
Whew.
67. Guys that had 90 targets, guys that had under 90 targets, but got there with 10 touchdowns. So somehow under 90 targets, but scored double-digit touchdowns, only 5 players. We're talking Robert Tonyan.
Right.
Robert Tonyan getting 59 targets and 11 touchdowns.
Which never happens again. Yeah.
And here's what makes it even crazier. 2 of them are super elite tight ends that just got hurt. They scored 10 touchdowns and got hurt. Rob Gronkowski 1 year and Antonio Gates. So it's just not happening. And then, of course, guys that finished top 5 with under 90 targets and under 10 touchdowns, 0. So that's why the 90 targets is so important. Bro. It's so crucial. Right. So
and I think too, when you're talking about targets, I mean, that's usually pretty sticky. You can usually kind of predict what the offense is going to do. Touchdowns are a lot flukier, right? Like touchdowns are almost impossible to project year over year,
I hate them.
even week to week. There is a lot of people out there that want to say, I think I even seen some of the projections where it's like, I'm projecting 0.6 touchdowns for this guy this week. Like it's just a 60% chance that he's going to score a touchdown. Like they don't even know he's going to score one. Like they're just like, I don't know, he's got a good chance. Like touchdowns are so ridiculous, and I love that. It's
look at any sports book in any given week, right, Hall? Like that's what you're talking about. It's like every player, every tight end is 0. It's 0.5
over under
touchdowns.
half.
Yeah, and you got to pay out the nose to bet the under, right? Like
yes,
it's crazy.
It's odds are slim. Yeah,
and here just to drive the point home, no tight end in the league had double-digit touchdowns last year. Nobody.
Well,
like nobody.
And I was actually going to pivot to that too, and say this tight end group that we're looking at is different in a way because I think you could say 3 of these tight ends are really just receivers in a tight end lineup. Yes. You know what I mean? Like Kyle Pitts is. I mean, come on, that's going to break fantasy at some point if they switch his eligibility because he's really a wide receiver. He's just a really big wide receiver who can also block, and so they call him a tight end and they pay him like a tight end. But it could be one of those things where it wasn't Marcus Colston. I think was one of those guys, and there was who was the other guy that was like, I want to get paid like a receiver, not a tight end. Like you're shorting me here. I think that could happen to Kyle Pitts. I
have a Marcus Colston jersey in my closet here because I won my league because he was incorrectly categorized by Yahoo as a wide receiver as a rookie, and he was the wide receiver 1 in PPR over Tony Gonzalez and Antonio Gates. Marcus Colston.
Hilarious. But that's kind of what I mean, right? Like there is this weird, like, I don't know, this changing of the guard maybe where I mean, my home league, we don't have a tight end requirement. It's 3 wide receiver tight end slots. And I think that there are more leagues going that direction, which doesn't necessarily ruin the tight end. It just makes those tight end 9 through 25 kind of pointless because it's like, well, who knows what they're going to get. And I don't have to start them. So I'm not going to.
So there's 2 great shields that are preventing that from happening, right? I got to defend the tight end wall here.
Go ahead. Please.
There truly are 2 great shields preventing that from happening. One is that Jimmy Graham is the guy you're thinking of.
Jimmy Graham, that's the one, yep.
He tried to fight the franchise tag by saying I'm a wide receiver, right? And he lined up at wide receiver on like 80% of his snaps, or I think it was like 76 or something like that. And they denied him, right?
Correct.
So he's an example.
Precedent.
He actually lined up more of his pass plays at wide receiver than Kyle Pitts did. Kyle Pitts is around like 70% or so. Now the other one is very recent, right? And that's Mike Gesicki is tagged right now.
Oh, that's
as
right.
A tight end. And he played 90% of his snaps at wide receiver. If I was Kyle Pitts' agent, I would be out front of Mike Gesicki's house every morning, just slamming on the door, being like, get your ass out here and fight this franchise tag because
Yeah.
that's going to make it impossible for Kyle Pitts to fight the franchise tag later, is it not? Like if Mike
Yeah.
Gesicki is successfully tagged as a tight end, which is clearly seems to be the case, what
Well,
kind
why
of
do you think
argument
they
does
kept
Pitts have?
him? He didn't even
Well,
fit, but he was so cheap they kept him anyway.
Exactly.
you
And
know?
that's what
Exactly.
Kyle's bringing up here in the chat is like Falcons will never want Pitts to switch. Of course, they'll have to pay him more as a wide receiver. But this is kind of what I mean. Like there is going to be a breaking point, I think, at some point here. And that's what makes it kind of, I don't know, in a way, kind of fun to talk about because I feel like that's where the tight end position is so different than any other position, right? You never hear anybody saying, oh, that wide receiver should be designated a running back. I mean, you have Cordell Patterson kind of doing some of that. But again, like that's not the same thing. Like that's not really as viable as this. Some of these guys are legitimately just big, huge Hulk tight end players at the wide receiver position. Well, are they tight ends or wide receivers? You know what I mean?
It's not a new thing. It's not a new thing because when Chan Gailey coached the Chiefs, Antonio Gates ran the second most slot routes in the entire league behind only Hines Ward. And Hines Ward was like the slottiest slot player there's ever been. You know what I mean?
What a slot.
No, but I'm saying I'm not saying it's slot.
I'm not saying it's new. I'm saying it seems like it's becoming more and more prevalent, right? Like it's been going on for so long that it's becoming such a normalized thing to kind of talk about. Whereas it used to be, you'd have one or two guys that you'd like Jimmy Graham, Marcus Colson, whatever. Now it feels like I said, like I could probably pick 6 of these guys that might even be considered. I think Gesicki's a great option there. But before we get too far out of this, I want to make sure that we go to Scott here for a little bit. Scott, what would you say of this 12? Who is your pick to fall out? We just had Cooper go through Ertz and Goddard. Who is someone that you wanted to talk about as falling out of this top 12 by next year?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Ertz is kind of the obvious one, just like age-wise. Him and Kelsey are the old men of the group. There's a lot of youth here. There's a lot of stable situations for a lot of these guys. So, it's interesting because you mentioned the tier break right after Waller, but then it's almost like, man, there's a tier break after these guys, and it's just anybody, right? You could just have that. Yep. Somebody's gonna pop, who, I don't know, but somebody will and knock one of these guys out. I've never been a Waller fan. Like, obviously we know what he can do. But I wasn't into him at any point previously. And then Hunter Renfro's emerging. They bring in Adams, and there was a study that I reference often, and I cannot find it. I have searched for it. I don't remember who did it. I would love to give them credit, and I would love to have the numbers to back up what I'm saying, because it was great. It was an incredible study, and it actually had to do with comparing slot receivers and tight ends, and also running back targets to tight end targets. Okay, and so it's not universal. It's not for every offense. But some offenses, the way that they run, the running back targets really affect the tight end targets. And so that's where I look at a guy like Dawson Knox and we say, well, they just brought in James Cook, right? And if he's going to be getting a ton of targets, they drafted Shakir, they have McKenzie, they signed Crowder. It's like they have all these slot guys. They have these running backs that catch passes. So, it's kind of the same thing with Waller, although they didn't really bring in a pass catching back necessarily. If you want to count like 34-year-old dude from the Patriots, I guess, Brandon Bolden or Amir Abdullah or whatever. Yeah. But that offense we know can probably support a tight end. I don't know if Derek Carr can. I don't know how many weapons Derek Carr can support. So I kind of look at Waller and Knox as just kind of the two most obvious ones to me. Now, I don't think Waller will fall off enough. Like, I don't think he'll drop out of the top 12. It's close. So that's why I would lean Knox out of this group. But since he's already tied on 12, that kind of seems too easy too. So I just gave you reasons for both of them. But honestly, I'll probably go Goddard here, just because, again, with Jalen Hurts, how many guys is he going to support? We know that offense does utilize the tight end, but I don't know, man. AJ Brown and Devontae Smith could be an incredible duo here for years to come. And I mean, I love those two receivers, and they have a whole slew of running backs that catch passes. So Goddard's going to be one of those guys where I feel like he's going to have to hit your threshold of 10 touchdowns. I don't know. I'll have to see what his targets have been, but I just don't know that he's going to get enough volume where I think he'll have to hit that touchdown threshold to be, a top guy. So that I would go with Dallas Goddard.
Scott, brother, you had the bazooka on your shoulder, You had the take. You actually like lit the take, the Darren Waller take. You had it lined up, and then you pulled out the pistol and were like, you know what? I'm gonna shoot this Goddard one. I like the Waller take, man.
I like the Waller take too.
Waller take because you're right. It's like, I mean, like think of it this way: if you're drafting Waller or Renfro, you're automatically drafting Derek Carr, right? Because like Devontae Adams is gonna be awesome, and for them to even have two awesome guys, Derek Carr's got to be at least reasonably startable. There's very few situations where you have two top players and the quarterback isn't reasonable. Like even with the Jets, with like Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker, Ryan Fitzpatrick was like you QB like 12 or 13. So I like it. I like that take that Renfro is a target hog. He's a route running technician, which McDaniels is gonna like. Devontae Adams, obviously, if you pay him that money, he's best friends with Derek Carr. Bought a house next door. Right. Like,
right. Yep.
Yeah. Like he's going to get his targets. And Waller, I mean, people forget that he washed out of the league early, with the substance abuse stuff and came back. So he's not, even though he's a new to us, he turns 30 in 2 weeks. I think
he's been around.
30, September.
Yeah. He's
13th.
Not young.
Right. So I like that. Yeah. Scott, stick with that big gun take, man. That's a good take. I like that, dude. Yeah. I mean, it gets the people going. It gets people going, saying he's gonna be out.
I think the reason that you're hesitant, I'm sure, is it because it's like that's a top 5, like that's one of the studs, and I do think every year we see one of those studs falls out, and then like we were just talking about, if he falls out from 5, he could go to 15 easy.
I mean, I've been talking about like it's such a 2 years though that I don't like him. So I mean, I think it's just like I just didn't want to continue saying him because that's what I've been saying. So I just want to give something different because I've just never been in on Waller. I literally have one share. For me to have one share in 46 leagues, I mean, that should tell you something. You know what I mean? Like I could just, And any random guy I'm going to have 3 or 4 shares of, just whether, no matter what. So for me to have one share, it doesn't make sense. And for the record, Goddard has never exceeded 87 targets. So again, he's going to have the touchdowns. He's never had more than 5 touchdowns. So I just don't see how he's going to be be in there. So I honestly I'd go with all 3 of those guys.
Yeah, there was a point I wanted to make on Goddard before I give mine, I guess. But like Goddard seemed to me like almost like too easy in a sense. I'm like, I feel like that's too obvious because when they signed AJ Brown or traded for AJ Brown, it was almost like, well, there goes Goddard. You know what I mean? Like it just was like so obvious. In a way, though, the thought experiment I wanted to go through here for a second. Let's say instead of trading that pick, let's say they drafted Treylon Burks. All right. And then you've got Burks in the preseason kind of struggling a little bit like he's doing for Tennessee. Let's say he just did that in Philadelphia. And if that was the case, Goddard could be going up to the top tier, right? Because now you've got Burks sort of struggling. It's a rookie pick. They're going to have to go all in this year. They're going to have to do something. They're going to have to be different. Obviously, they just got Trey Sermon on waivers. That's how desperate they are at running back, that they're going after the scraps of the 49ers heap over here. But again, like if that one little twist, if they had just drafted Burks and maybe had a down preseason, and you got Devonta Smith as the top target getter and Goddard the clear number 2, I think Goddard could easily get 100 targets this year if that was the case. But now that they traded for a stud, a guy that we know that you can lock in for 130 targets or whatever, I mean, like those all got to go from somewhere, and it's going to come from Goddard, in my opinion, not going to come from Devonta as much. And just even if it doesn't, it splits them all the way. Like, yeah, I'm kind of out on Goddard, even though I'm drafting him in a couple different best ball leagues because again, I like his upside. I think that there's that chance that offense just lights itself on fire, like we were talking about, and they go from least passing to most passing in 1 year, which is bonkers. But I don't know. I feel like that's the offense I'm willing to attach a horse to because man, they just went out and spent a ton of money, and they may not run the ball at all, other than Jalen Hurts. Like that, just all of it filters to passing. It could be Hurts passes 60 passes a game, and Goddard gets 12 a game. That's not hard to expect, and that's a ton of targets if that's the case. So. I'm just saying I could see it being a rocket ship to the moon.
And I'll tell you, the one thing that I hate more than anything is that every single year, without fail, there's a wide receiver, there's a tight end who another player on the team gets hurt or gets traded, and they backdoor their way into being a top 5 or 6 guy. And then everyone's victory lapping. Oh, I told you that Zach Ertz was going to get traded. Or like Mike Gesicki, like, I knew Will Fuller was going to miss the entire season all along. You know what I mean? It's like, no, you didn't, dude. Shut up.
That actually pivots perfectly to my pick, which is Schultz, because in my opinion, Dalton Schultz kind of came out of nowhere, right? He was one of those guys that nobody expected. He got the targets. He got the touchdowns, not all the way on both, but like he got up there in both and did enough to be a top 10 tight end, top 12 tight end, right? I'm not sure that sticks. I think this Cowboys offense is going to be a little weird this year. Obviously, they're still going to pass the ball to Zeke. They're still going to pass the ball to CeeDee Lamb, obviously, is the number one target. Gallup comes back. He's going to get targets. And I just don't know if there's enough to go around, to be honest. I'm not 100% sure on this. And so for me, Schultz has been like one of those guys I just can't trust him. And I think if I'm looking for somebody who can jump into the top 2 on their team, I'm not sure Schultz is the guy. Yes, he could be the guy, of course, but I'm just not that sure of it. I just don't see it happening as much. And I think that Cowboys offense, with the way their offensive line is set up, very different than last year. And I mean, just where are they going? They're clearly a middle of the road team. I don't see them changing enough. They got rid of Amari Cooper. I don't think those targets all go to Schultz like everybody seems to think. And it just, I don't know, it makes me nervous. So that's why Schultz was my pick to lose the top 12.
Schultz is all window, no talent, right? We talk about roster talent and start window.
Yes, he's all opportunity.
He's all window. Because like I would in every year I go in Pro Football Focus. One of my big things is like who can beat their guy in man-to-man, right? Because when you get down to the goal line, it's zero coverage across the board. Everyone's just manning up, and you either can beat your man or you can't. That's why Hunter Henry scored 9 touchdowns, not just because he's the only guy there, but he is very good in man-to-man situations. Kyle Pitts needs to work on that. He got 6 end zone targets, only caught one of them. Cole Kmet needs to work on it. Dalton Schultz got, according to Pro Football Focus, Dalton Schultz had more receptions when he was uncovered, not just against zone. He had a ton versus zone, but he had more receptions that were uncovered than he did versus man-to-man. Very few.
Pretty weird.
And when you go back, it's like when you have Zeke and Pollard and Amari and Lamb, then you forget about Dalton Schultz. Like Robert Tonyan is another great example where he just snuck out and scored touchdowns because everyone's like, oh, you got to watch out for Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones and all these guys, right? So like when I look at Schultz, it's like he's almost sometimes I wonder if it's going to be worse for him that the defense actually is making him.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like I don't think he's as good as his stats showed, and that's what it just makes me nervous. I'm not saying I hate the guy. It just I think his floor is really low, and I think sometimes if I'm drafting a tight end, especially outside that top 5. I'm not drafting a low floor tight end. I would rather have a high floor tight end with a high ceiling, of course. But like I would rather go with someone who's a little bit less risky on the floor side if I'm going with a tight end in any of those middle rounds. Otherwise, I'm just going to wait and like give me somebody with the same kind of floor and ceiling that you can get with like Gesicki, for instance, who we can pivot into as someone who is Scott. I know you like Gesicki this year, and he's someone you listed on the sheet here as someone not in the top 12 to become in the top 12 next year. I think there's maybe a pivot there, but what are your thoughts?
Okay, so I actually don't like him for this year. And so the reason is, so you're like, well, how do you not like for this year? And how is he going to move in the top 12? That doesn't make any sense. Well, we're talking 1 year from right now. Okay. And what's going to change is, he could get traded. Probably not. We talked about it earlier. They kept him basically because he's a big receiver and they got him for cheap. They're almost paying Cedric Wilson as much as they're paying Gesicki. So, I mean, that's, you know what I mean? Like, and he's like, what, the 4th or 5th receiver. So, I mean, that's how cheap Gesicki is to keep. But we're hearing out of camp, we know he doesn't fit in with the system. He's not a blocking tight end. He's really that true, receiving threat and is not a great blocker. He's not a ferocious beast like George Kittle, who's playing that 12 personnel, can play in line, do all the blocking that they want him to do there for the run game. And so, is it possible that he gets that 10 touchdowns because, he's one of the few big guys there? Maybe, Tyreek and Waddle are going to have explosive plays and long touchdowns and things like that, but they're not big guys necessarily. So they may not be great red zone threats. So maybe Gesicki gets the touchdowns and can boost himself up a little bit here. But what's going to happen is maybe he gets traded, or maybe he's just going to go sign somewhere. Okay. I don't know where that's going to be, but somebody's going to pay him. And, he's a freak athlete. And, Kyle Senner is in the chat, and Kyle is somebody I respect very much, his opinion and all the great work that he does. And, he said, I don't see much difference between Goddard and Gesicki, yet their ADPs seem vastly different. I was just telling you, Goddard's never hit 90 targets in the season. Okay. Nor 5 or 6 touchdowns as his high. Well, Gesicki in the last 3, he had 112 targets last year. He had 85 and 89 the years before. So he's almost getting to that 90 target threshold. I understand it's a new offense. I'm not talking about this year. I'm saying wherever he goes after the season, like maybe what's going to happen? 3 things. He's going to get traded. If a team trades for him, obviously they believe in him and are going to give him a role. He's going to figure it out and play in the system. Not likely to happen, but it's possible, right? And then he's, has maybe Kittle light, right? Okay. Or the third thing is he's just going to be free next year and he's going to go sign somewhere to a team that wants him and they're going to put him in a role. And so regardless of what happens in those scenarios, his value is going to go up. So I'm in on buying Gesicki now because this is the low point. This is, I mean, maybe it gets lower during the season if he does nothing, right? So we have to watch for that too. But I am in. I'm buying Gesicki. Let's go. I've seen this dude. He's a freak of nature. I watched him in college. He was a monster. We love that athleticism, and I think it's something like Scott Connor said this on Dynasty and Chill, like a RAS score of 7 or above and or below a 4.840. And if you have one of those, you have to have one of those, ideally both, but you have to have at least one of those to be on that tight end radar at these top, elite tight ends. We don't want the tight end 12. Why we trade for a guy to be the tight end 12? We want one of these guys that can hit big, and Gesicki is still in that. The guy's 26. He's not Waller at 30. So that's where I'm at with him.
I love it. And I'll just say this. I think Gesicki is one of those guys that I love drafting at their ADP, right? Like center hit it perfectly. Like Goddard and Gesicki are very similar, but Gesicki is so cheap. Like in redraft, especially, like he's on waivers in some of my redraft leagues still, and I've got a guy like Pitts or Andrews. I don't really need a second tight end like we were just talking about where there's a shallower bench. And I'm just like, how is nobody picking this guy up? Like it's such a freebie. But it's exactly what you just said. He could have a very low floor. There is a chance this year that he comes out and stumbles a little bit or isn't quite the same guy that we've seen. But he's terrific at that underwear Olympics. I remember that forever. That whole the combine for him was just blew people's doors away, and he was supposed to be the next god coming of whatever. And it's just like I think Gesicki. I agree with you. I think Gesicki probably has a little bit of a trip down to the bottom still to come. I don't think he's hit rock bottom in value. But I would not be shocked. And I said this actually with Rocky last week, I think it was even. Like there's a chance the value goes down between now and next August, but it also is going to be higher. Like we're not at the floor. We're not at the base. I think it could go, becomes tight end 2022, but by next August, he's tight end 10, right? Because he's on a new team or the team has changed around him because they were so bad. They, shipped everyone out. Like I think his talent is exactly what you were talking about, Coop, who's on mute, by the way. I want to make sure that you get the chance to talk about Gesicki because his talent is huge.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm fully on board with the way Scott's looking at this, where this year you buy low because he's in a terrible situation, and next year he's going, like, any team that signs Mike Gesicki is not going to sign him to have him put his hand in the dirt. You're going to sign him to do what he does, right? You're going to sign him to play wide receiver. So next year is when the upside comes. It goes back farther than college football, farther than the combine. Go back and watch his high school highlights, and I'm not just talking basketball, which is amazing. Like his football is awesome. His basketball is awesome. Dude, he's got some volleyball highlights. He was like a high school volleyball star he is smashing the ball.
That's
dude.
great.
Like, yeah. I'm deep in the research. I'm watching high school volleyball highlights. I'm like, damn.
Only Andrew Cooper can bring up the volleyball highlights during tight end talk. I love it.
That's great.
But the dunks, dude, the dunks are crazy too. Don't watch the volleyball highlights, but the dunks are sick, man. Like Mike Gesicki.
Don't watch. That's a terrific advice all the time. Don't watch the volleyball highlights.
Dunking in transition, Mike Gesicki is. So so I'm on board there. And while I got the mic here, you want me to just give you mine?
Go for it. Yep.
Because I know you have a trade lined up for today, I imagine, for one of the fans after. So so mine, I like to everyone knows I like Evan Ingram. I'm gonna get that out there right now, that when we talk about floor, and we're talking about you grab your second tight end, and here we're talking about guys that could move into that top 12. Of all the tight ends going in the second round, the second group here, the tight end 2s, and you actually kind of rattled through it and said who could lead their team in targets: Kyle Pitts, Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce. After that, not a lot of guys. Why can't Evan Ingram lead the team in targets? Early on, when you're drafting tight ends, you say to yourself, why? Why am I spending up on Mark Andrews? And you go through the different things. You say, why am I doing this? Okay, he's got this, he's got that, that. Later on in the draft, I stop asking why, and I start asking why not. Why can't this guy lead his team in targets? Why can't David Njoku be the second target on the team? And David Njoku, if he is a second target on the team and they don't really add much, now he's the second target for Deshaun Watson. Like that's something, a guy that could come up. So that's what you got to start asking yourself. One, like, why can't this guy do it now? Right? Because that's where you're going to get the value as fast as possible this year. And then next year, start looking and saying, okay, who's got contracts coming up? Who's going places? Like people keep telling me about Alberto, right? And Alberto had one of the biggest increases in value possible with the starting tight end getting traded away for an elite quarterback, right? And talk about the biggest value dump of all time, and Noah Fant getting traded away for a quarterback. And not only that, but he goes with the quarterback that he knows. And then that quarterback doesn't win the job. Oh my God, dude. Talk about getting a dump truck. He got thrown out of the dump truck and then it backed up over him, right?
Well, so I wanted to talk about Fant because that's the guy that I wanted to get into. I mentioned Irv Smith initially on the sheet, but I don't know. Irv, there's too many different things. I don't see him being a top 2 target. But I think there's a very high likelihood that Lockett is done or gone or just kind of moving away. And again, if we're going to say Fant did pretty well with Drew Lock in Denver, and then obviously, like you just said, he lost the job to Geno Smith or is losing the job, everyone word that, there's a very high likelihood that Fant gets a better quarterback out of this at some point and becomes the top target or the second target to DK Metcalf. That's very likely because that wide receiver room after that is what, D. Eskridge? I mean, they got like nobody left in Seattle. I think, didn't they just get JJ Arcega-Whiteside in Seattle? You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like, what? Like, well, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, they got this guy, and then they're like, we don't even need him because that's how bad he is and how bad their receiver room is. But why can't Fant be a number 2 target on his team behind DK Metcalf? I think, again, the way this team is shaping up, I fully expected, and I don't think I'm alone on this, I fully expected Seattle to somehow scoop up Jimmy Garoppolo, whether it's free agency or some weird 2-team, 3-team trade, whatever you want to call it. Like, there was going to be some shenanigans. I was just waiting for it. And then the Niners screwed it all up and re-signed Garoppolo. And I was like,
or if John Lynch had some balls.
Well,
you know,
yeah.
Hey, Jimmy G, you ain't it. Go into the division. You know,
you're not it. Then we're going to beat you. You can't. You know, you're not going to with us. You're against us. I totally agree. But no, and I still think there's a chance he gets traded. I don't want to make it sound like he's on the team for this whole year. I think Jimmy G still has a chance to get moved at some point here. Injuries or something can happen. You know, we just saw Sam Darnold get hurt, as if that matters. But like, you start to see teams that kind of panic a little bit that are in their win now window. Anyway, back to Noah Fant. I do think Fant is tight end 14 right now, and I think he's getting a lot of shade thrown his way because he's on a bad team or with a bad quarterback. That's where he was last year, and we loved him. Why do we hate him now? I don't get it. And if anything, he's a better target opportunity than he was at Denver because he had Judy and Sutton. Now, again, Judy got hurt, but then he had Tim Patrick come out of nowhere who got a ton of targets. I mean, like, we loved Fant last year. Why do we hate him now? I don't get it. I just don't get it. It makes no sense.
It's like Dalton Schultz is like the villain here, where he's got the window, right? And like, he's on top. This is the middle of the movie, right? Where like at the beginning, we were like, Noah Fant, great combine. He's the hero, right? And then right now is where the villain's on top, right? The guy that, he runs like a 4.8 or whatever. And like, not super interesting. And Noah Fant's like, he's kicking the mud. It's raining, right? Like he's in a dark.
He's all downtrodden.
Yeah. And then that's when he's the talent guy that you have to wait for the window. So I agree there. Like, his combine is one of the best as well.
His talent was insane. Yes.
96 and I think percentile speed, 96 or 98. One of those two. He's like,
well, even to put this back into dynasty perspective for a minute, the guys we're talking about here, like Evan Ingram, David Njoku, Mike Gesicki, and even Noah Fant, even Irv Smith, all of these guys are relatively cheap, even in tight end premium leagues. I mean, you might be able to get, a third for some of these guys. Like Njoku, I'll bet you could send a third and get Njoku in the right league. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not impossible. And I think that's the kind of upside we're looking for, is go get that talent. Like you just said, talent, the roster needs to be full of talent. And that's exactly who you're going for, is go get that talent on your team. And then if they blow up or something, you put them in your lineup. But even then, you got trade values now. You got a whole bunch of new value you just added to your team that a third or even a second in some cases, not worth it. I'd much rather have the player who's going to rise this year. So that's exactly why I like this attitude. And that's why I like, just in general, talking about some of this stuff. Is there anything tight end wise you want to cover, Cooper, before we move on to our Find Me a Trade segment?
Yeah, let me just rattle a couple names just for the people out there in the deeper leagues. Brevin Jordan, a name that guy, could have that window. Him versus Nico Collins to be the second guy. Might happen, might not.
You're not afraid of OJ Howard, who just signed there?
No, dude. No. OJ Howard, dude. OJ Howard's agent. OJ Howard's agent, like, he should fire his agent out of a cannon into the sun, bro. Like, it's just like, what are you doing signing behind Dawson? Like, you're like, oh, you're finally a free agent after his 5th-year option gets picked up. They're like, let's go sign you behind a dude that eats breakfast every morning with the quarterback of the team and Dawson Knox and Josh Allen. It's like, dude, what are you doing?
No.
If you want him to keep the job, sign him to be like the blocking tight end with Pitts. Right? It's like, that's such a safe job. You can't disappoint anybody when you're just blocking while Pitts is running.
That's what he went. He went to the Bengals. He went to my team, and we have Hayden Hurst, who is our starter. And I don't think there's even any dispute with that. There's no roster bubble there. But our blocking tight end is Drew Sample. Well, I'd
Drew
say
Sample's
OJ
got the
Howard's better than Drew
safe-
Sample.
Drew Sample's job is safe now.
Well,
It's
that's what I'm
you know,
saying.
it's
But like OJ Howard is better than Drew Sample for a blocking tight end. Like
Yeah.
bring him in there and have him be a second. Well, then we got Asiasi off waivers, so now we don't need OJ Howard anymore, right? It's like I think Asiasi is a terrific blocking tight end too. Like he's not going to catch a lot of passes. He's not fantasy relevant, but he's NFL relevant, and I think that's where we need it on the Bengals. I say we. I'm a fan. But like the Bengals needed a player like that, and I thought it was interesting that they brought OJ Howard in for a visit and then got Asiasi on waivers, and he was like, "See, I'm going to Houston." Like he was like, "Well, I don't have a chance to play here," but so you're not worried about him at all, which I think is fair. Brevin Jordan, terrific name. Who else you got?
Yeah, and then so I think and kind of like Scott's Gesicki play, where the floor might be during the season. I think that a player, Trey McBride, I think the shine's going to come off him a little bit when Zach Ertz is the starter, right? And you slide in there and grab him quietly. If you look at what the Cardinals have been doing this offseason, is they've been shedding a lot of the weight with the Cardinals. Now it's only 3 tight ends there.
It's those 2 and Max Williams. Is that it? And that's it.
Yeah. Max Williams, dude, 20% of Max Williams' yards last year came on a pass that wasn't even intended for him. It was like tipped. Dude, I'm not even a big eye test guy. You know that, right, dude? Like, I'm not a huge eye test player, but go watch Max Williams highlights, dude. It literally looks like a guard picked up a fumble and was just trying to, it looks like Dan Conley's kickoff return against the Packers. You know what I mean? Like,
his highlights are easy to watch. It's only going to take you like 3 bites of cereal. You know what I mean? Like, you're not even going to do much while you're doing it. It's fine. No, Trey McBride's a great one. Trey
McBride is a guy that you can, and I think it's going to be like there's hype about him now, and then once people realize that it's Ertz and he's not really even playing, that's when you slide in and you say, "Let me get McBride." Especially if you have Ertz now, slide and be like, "Dude, you don't McBride. What are you going to do with McBride? Why don't you send him over to me?"
He's not even starting. We haven't heard anything. You've got crickets about him in preseason, which is exactly when you want to strike. Yep.
Yeah. And then the one that I think could gain the most value for the rookies is Daniel Bellinger. He's actually starting. And then Ricky Seals-Jones was the only other pass catching viable option, and they put him on season ending IR.
They'll pass him up.
Yeah. So, those are the exciting ones. Isaiah Likely is a long-term stash just because Mark Andrews is there, but it's a name that has to be said if we're doing a deep tight end podcast.
Yep.
Has to be said. And then of course I got to throw, my deepest, if you're in just an insanely 32 team league where every single guy's owned, I still believe in a guy, Eli Wolf. His profile, his profile is special. He's bounced around, missed a couple spots, but he is the quintessential like pass catching only guy, and he runs like a 4.43 or something like that. He's probably never going to do anything, but if he does do anything, it's not going to be blocking. So like we're talking crazy deep leagues, but you guys, I mean, this is what you guys do. You have sharp gamers that listen to you. Scott's got 75 teams, right? Like,
going up every day.
Yeah. So if you're in one of those crazy leagues that like no one ever gives advice for the crazy leagues, right? I'm giving you a name. There you go. I gave you a practice squad player name.
That is as deep as we're willing to go into the tight ends. Let's just put it that way. Like that
deep as we go.
Deep in the tight end realm there. Appreciate that info. Again, we could talk tight ends for hours with you, Goop. I love that. It's there's so many different ways to go about this. But unfortunately, we have to pivot to our final segment of the night, our classic Find Me a Trade segment. I'm going to go ahead and read through some of this stuff. And then, Scott, when I get to the point, if you want to read his breakdown, I'll switch over to bring up the team. But this was submitted by our fan, Pete Aquaviva. Sorry, I'm going to screw this up. Aquaviva. PD Aquaviva on Twitter. It's a 12-team, 2 QB, and a punter league. This is not a super flex. This is 2 QB with a punter, and I love that it's a punter league. I don't think any of our trades involve punters because we're just way out of our depth on that one. But it is with tiered PPR, so it's 0.4 for running backs, 1 for receiver, and 1.5 for tight end. So there is a tight end premium. Tons of yardage bonuses. There's point for first down, tight end bonuses for average yards per reception. There's a whole bunch of fun, unique settings in this one, which I love looking at these leagues and just getting ideas to be like, ooh, that's kind of a fun twist. Like it feels like Scott Fish dreamt this up one night in like a fever dream. He's just like trying to make every position equal. And I just thought it was genius. Anyway, it's a short roster. I'll be honest too. You start 13, but you only have 25 men on your roster. Yeah, so this is one of those 12-team, 25-man roster. That's pretty shallow. And you're drafting punters too. Let's be honest. You're going to have some punters in this league, which makes even different. But start 13 with 2 QBs. Again, not super flex, but 2 QBs, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, a tight end, 4 flex, and a punter. I just thought it was brilliant that he did that. I'll pull up the team, Scott, if you want to read his quick blurb real quick.
Yep. All right. So Pete says this is year 2. So he did productive struggle in the startup draft. Granted, he's weak at wide receiver, but and lacks top end talent. But running back is elite and tight end, or I'm sorry, lack top end talent at wide receiver and running back, but tight end and quarterback are elite, which is not a bad strategy when you're talking 2 quarterbacks and tight end premium. And so this is year 2 that we're going into here. And I don't necessarily agree with what he says, but we'll get into that.
Well, yeah, we'll get into that because I think there is some ways that you could look at this and say, either he's top in the league or he needs some work. And we'll kind of talk about that. But his team he's got Patrick Mahomes, Trey Lance, and Deshaun Watson at quarterback. Again, when you only have 25 roster spots, you got to be a little lean somewhere. And 3 QBs, those are all startable options if you count Watson. Running back, he's got Cam Akers, Tyron Davis-Price, Elijah Mitchell, Tony Pollard, and Ramondre Stevenson. Those are all names that are worth starting or holding. I don't hate that for a shallow running back room. I don't mind that. Receiver, he's got a lot of names, but again, it's not top heavy. Like you were saying, this is probably his weakest position. His best receiver is DK Metcalf. He's got Tyler Boyd, Traylon Burks, David Bell, Drake London, a lot of rookies. I like those top rookies there. He's got Rondale Moore, Sterling Shepard, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't want to miss that guy. Demarcus Robinson, Jacoby Myers, Elijah Moore. Like there's a lot of good wide receiver 2s on this team. But he doesn't have that one stud, at least not yet. I don't know if London or Burks maybe at some point might be there, but a little weak there. And then tight end, he's got the one and only Kyle Pitts, who we were talking about. That is elite. And then Donald Parham and Adam Troutman behind him. I don't hate those 2. It's a little risky at the Parham pick, but whatever. And then for punter, he's got Jack Fox from Detroit, which again, I have no commentary on. I have no commentary. I don't know if that's great or not. On taxi squad, we've got Denzel Mims, Josh Palmer, and Noah Gray. So again, it's a little bit more depth trying to find that player. But yeah, I mean, the quarterbacks are great. Lance and Mahomes every week isn't bad until Watson comes back. And then you've got Pitts at tight end. Never going to be upset with that. You got Cam Akers, Elijah Mitchell, Tony Pollard. I mean, you can get through with that running back room, but the receivers are where it kind of strikes me as a little. So yeah, Scott, if you want to get into yours first, maybe you seem to have an opinion that you want to get into about this team. I'll let you start out.
Yeah, I mean, when you have 2 quarterbacks and you have tight end premium, I don't mind building around those positions because they're typically the hardest to get and the cheapest is during the startup, right? And so I'm fine with doing that and then filling in these other pieces. I mean, there's tons of starting receivers in there and there's a lot of upside. So they're really young right now, but I think you could find that high-end talent will just naturally appear as these guys, grow and learn and gain experience. So I don't mind that at all. And, running back, essentially, if you want to say it's punted, I mean, okay, but there's some really good players there. They'll all likely have a role. You're going to get a lot of starts out of those guys. So I'm totally good with that. However, I disagree that it's a lead at tight end. Like, yes, you have Pitts. Okay, great. Right. He's locked in, but nothing behind that. I mean, if Donald Parham, Adam Troutman, and Noah Gray, they might combine for 12 points this year. Yep. I mean, honestly, they might, because we don't really know what Parham's going to be. I mean, he had that scary injury at the end of last year. Yeah. Adam Troutman, we're hearing that he's taken the next step forward and all that, but until we see it, I don't know. And Noah Gray, I mean, he's not going to do anything with Kelsey there. So none of those guys, there's zero depth. So, I mean, if Pitts misses any time or, I mean, it's just, there's nothing there. You're going to lose that advantage. So I'd like to see some more depth at that position, especially with the tight end premiums, the first down tight end points, the bonuses, average yards per reception, other things like that. So that's a position that scores a lot of points in this league. And I'd almost want to go like bully tight end when you have Pitts and add somebody else. Now, obviously, it's going to be hard to trade for those guys in this league, and you may not want to give up a lot for a guy like Waller or Kelsey, who's older. So I want to do 2 things here. I'm going to tie in our tight end talk, right, and bolster that tight end position. And I'm going to come back to a guy that, people are going to say, well, why would you trade Deshaun Watson now? You've been holding him this whole year. Now you finally know when he's going to play. Well, because his value is coming back. That's why you're going to trade him now. He's still going to miss the first, 11 games, right? So we don't know if Trey Lance is it. We think he is. We think he's going to be great. And you have Patrick Mahomes as that anchor, but you're relying on those 2, and that's it. That's all you've got. So I would almost want to, you're going to basically have to punt this year because of the depth that you don't have, the lack of depth. And so if you can trade Watson and get points in your lineup right now, then Lance becomes a luxury that if he hits, now you got Lance and Mahomes. Oh yeah, that's huge. And then you could even tier down and add an elite receiver or add depth at running back or tight end. So here's my trade. It's to trade away Deshaun Watson, and I would try a 24 first. And this should be enough to get it done. I mean, that's pretty hefty Watson and Force. Now, again, with Watson, some guys just don't want him on their team, so it is what it is. But this is what I'm saying: Deshaun Watson and a 24 first to Hasta La Visca, boys, for Justin Fields, Jimmy G, and Mike Gesicki. And you would say, why would I want to trade away Watson when we're normally talking these shallow rosters? We want the best players. We typically want to get the best player in the trade. But in this case, this lines up perfectly with the players here, where you get Fields, who's going to be that third quarterback for you. Now you've got 3 options. So no matter what happens with Lance or Fields, you've got one of those 2 guys is likely going to hit. You're giving yourself 2 opportunities behind Mahomes there. Plus you have 3 starters now. So now you can mix and match and do what you need to do, right? You're going to get points in your lineup. Then you're adding in Jimmy G, okay, who's going to essentially give you that security behind Trey Lance. And then he could be a starter somewhere next year or a bridge quarterback or whatever it's going to be, right? So now you're really securing your Trey Lance and really minimizing the risk. And then you're also adding Mike Gesicki, which is, like we talked about earlier, a guy who I think can add a lot of value, give you some depth for this year. And then maybe he can be that guy that makes that jump into the top, 8 to 10 next year, giving you that potential bully tight end position here with that going forward. And so, guys, I don't maybe necessarily love at the end of the day, but I think this is a great move for your roster. And it makes you competitive right away. You could win with this roster. Things would have to go right, but typically that's how it works, right? You need some luck for it. But if right now you're just rolling with Watson, I mean, you're probably not going to win this year if you're going to have to make it to the playoffs and see if he comes back. And then even then, he hasn't played in 2.5 years. And, I don't think he really has that great of weapons. I mean, he's got a couple guys, but it's not like he's loaded there. So.
Well, the one thing I wanted to jump in with this, and this Hasta La Visca, boys, is an interesting roster build. It's got 7 tight ends, 6 receivers, 6 running backs, and 5 quarterbacks. So it's very balanced across the positions, but tight end is where it's heaviest. So again, to speak to what we've been talking about, right? Go after some of those tight ends. He's got Dalton Schultz, Jonnu Smith, Robert Tonyan, Mike Gesicki, Greg Dulcich, Taysom Hill, and Chigozie Okonkwo. Like, there's a whole bunch of weird depth in there. He's got all sorts of layers of tight ends there. You know what I mean? Like, he's got Taysom Hill, who we don't even know what the hell he's going to be. So I love the idea of getting someone like Gesicki on that and kind of getting him off of that. But Cooper, what do you think about this one? Is this a trade you would pull off? Do you think this would help the team? Where are you at with this one?
Yeah. So, I mean, that trade, and this is my take on the whole thing, is that I look at what he's writing and what he's saying, and I almost feel like he wants to trade just to trade. You know what I mean? Like, that trade that Scott just pulled up, like, if you have the trade bug and you want to trade, that's the kind of trade you got to do right there. What I would do with this team is I wouldn't do anything so drastic. I mean, he says he's loaded at quarterback, and he is, but he's not loaded at tight end, right? He's built to, make a run this year, but more to build to the future. You know what I mean?
That's right.
So I look at this roster. The first things I would do is actually waiver moves. So I kind of scan through. You got the taxi squads on here, so I can't see waivers, but I know who's not here, right? So the first thing I would do is I would drop Noah Gray and pick up Jody Fortson. I think Jody Fortson's ahead of Noah Gray on that depth chart. Like, he even coming off the Achilles, he's been operating ahead. He looked good in the preseason. So I want Jody Fortson. He goes by Joe. I want him over Noah Gray. The other move I'm doing is I'm dropping Marquez Callaway, who is dust, right? Like, it's Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry. I'm dropping Marquez Callaway. I'm gonna add Daniel Bellinger. Like, I see Isaiah Likely's owned. You just mentioned Chiga Okonkwo. Daniel Bellinger is a starting tight end in this league, and he's not being rostered by anybody, man. So go grab him right now. Hopefully your league mates don't watch this show, because you gotta watch it before him, right? So go get him right this moment. And now your tight end room is a little more robust. I feel like, you have Kelsey's
awesome.
backup. Yeah, like, I go do that right now. Then what I would do is, like, you look at this lineup, right? And in the league, you have these bonuses and stuff, right? Like the unique bonuses for big plays and yardage and stuff. And then you look at this roster, and the dude's got every low A dot slow slot receiver that's ever been invented, right? It's
Yeah.
like Tyler Boyd, Jacoby Myers, Amon-Ra St. Brown,
Sterling Shepard. I mean, it's
Sterling
Curtis Samuel.
Shepard,
These are slot names that we've seen for years that have never panned out. Yeah.
Rondell Moore. So I package up whatever I can there. And personally, I'm willing to trade Amon-Ra St. Brown because, my take on it is that he flashed on a ghost ship, a team that was moving assets to the future, and they had nobody for targets, and the targets that they did have in Hawkinson and Swift and Jamal Williams and Quintez Cephas, they all got hurt. So for me, I think now you're selling high on a player like that. I would try and package up what you can there and try and get the biggest piece you can back. So I was kind of looking through, and what you got to kind of do in a situation like this is convince somebody else. Like, go and look at your league mates and look at the strongest teams and be like, look at Pete's team. Like, you're not going to compete with Pete this year. Why don't you, I don't know what your friends' names are. Look at Hail John David Booty. Look at his team. Like, you're not going to be able to compete with this guy. So why don't you trade me, your guy, and I'll give you a bunch of these assets. So you go to a guy like the Denver Broncos and say, look at your team. Like, you got James Cook, AJ Dillon, you got all these guys that are like
Desmond Ridder, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones.
Matt Ryan. You're playing for the future. Why don't you give me Dalvin Cook? I'll give you a bunch of young up and comers. I'll give you Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'll give you a pick. I'll give you
He's also got 4 good tight ends on that Denver Broncos team. He's got Freiermuth, Hawkinson, Knox, and Smith. Like Irv Smith is, those are all good options to bolster that tight end room to give you some depth.
See what you can pry away, dude. If you got to, even if you want to go real big and try and take all his pieces and do the Watson trade, bring Matt Ryan back. He could be somebody that helps you out a little bit.
A good third option, safe third option till Lance gets it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and let's put this in
you can't start 17 slot wide receivers in your lineup, dude. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, you start 13, but not all of them are going to be slot receivers. Yeah.
No, and that's the threshold receiver discussion, right? Because you have to find that threshold. You're not going to know when to start these guys. You're going to just be playing, flip a coin. Do I start this guy? Do I start this guy? You're not going to know, and you're going to be frustrated all season on guys. So what I would do is maybe pick like 6 guys and then just the rest of them, whether you're like a guy like Sterling Shepard, who I've loved for a long time, I cut him because he's coming off an Achilles. He's aging. That's a new offense.
That's such a red flag, right?
Tons of other guys. Just cut him. You're never going to know when to start him. Like, so, Demarcus Robinson, those guys, honestly, I would just cut them. But if you can get anything, maybe offer them, package a 4th for a 3rd, Sterling Shepard and a 4th for a 3rd. See if you can do that. See if you can pick up some other picks. Throw up your auto trade block. So post on the message board and say, I will take any, 4th round pick for Callaway, Robinson, Sterling Shepard. I'll take any 4th round pick. Okay. And just see who can bite. If you could pick up a couple extra picks and then turn those guys into running backs. Okay, turn those guys into, go find the Jamal Williams, go find the Dearness Johnsons, go find those guys that they're not going to win the league for you, but they're going to give you a couple starts. When those guys play, it's because there's injuries and they're starting and they're going to give you the volume and what you're going to get. And they're going to give you more than, whatever Jacoby Myers is going to give you every week.
A name you said earlier, Amir Abdullah.
There you go. Yes.
Rex
Burkhead is on waivers in this league. Like, exactly. Same with Rex Burkhead. Like, go get these guys instead. Yeah, I completely agree.
Drop a bunch of those wide receivers, man. Use one of those on Daniel Bellinger. But yeah, I didn't even see Demarcus Robinson's name there. He was just cut and then signed by the Ravens, who, there's room for one wide receiver there. So Scott, I didn't look deep enough, but you found guys worse than Marquez Callaway on there. You know what I mean? Like,
I think too, though, and I think we're on the same page because my trade was in the same vein. It was like, I kind of agree with what you're saying there too, Coop. It's like, man, I don't know if you really need to trade. I think you probably could get away with a couple that might help you out, but every league is so unique. And then again, I'm looking at this with like the punters and everything. I'm like, I don't know how that works. Like, is it worth trying to get a better punter? Is yours good? I don't even know. Is it good to have another punter? Again, it's just such a weird thing. But the one thing I looked at this roster, and the first thought that I had was you have to start 2 QBs. And one of your QBs is Watson. So he's not starting for the first 11 weeks. And the other 2 QBs have bye weeks in 8 and 9. You're going to be without a rosterable QB. You need to make a move somewhere. So in my book, I looked at that and said, hey, that's where I would make some sort of pivot. I love the idea of trading Watson. I just personally, I would trade Watson every league that I have. I'm not a Watson fan. I don't believe that I want him on my team. I'm just one of those people that I'd rather win without him than win with him. You know what I mean? Like, just find to give away the value, right? So I love that trade that you put in there, but mine was similar but different. And I'll just say it this way, like the Jimmy G signing does make me a little concerned for Lance, but not in the way that you think. It makes me concerned that the league will value him less, not that he will be worth less. And this is sometimes where the game within the game becomes more valuable, because I think a lot of times we talk a lot about values and it's like in a vacuum. Your league might not value Lance as much now. Your league, your trade value for Lance might have just taken a hit, whether you know it or not, whether you agree with it or not. So my thought is, let's send Lance before that gets worse. Let's kind of cut off the bleeding. Let someone else deal with it. Even if I don't think his value is going down, I'm not necessarily willing to hold while my league says his value is going down, right? Like, it's a pride thing. And I'm like, all right, well, let me send Lance. So my thing was sending Lance and a couple of throw-ins like David Bell and Callaway, whoever you want, right? And even just cutting those guys. If it's just Lance, it's fine. And not cutting David Bell, but cutting some other guys like Callaway and Shepard. But sending Lance to the team, which is here's my number, so call me Brady, which again, that's one of my jams. I love that Carly Rae Jepsen song. But for Brady, Ezekiel Elliott, and Allen Robinson. And my thinking here is you start 13. And normally I like to have in shallow rosters and all this, I like to have studs at the top. But if you're starting 13 players, I would rather have Brady, Zeke, and Allen Robinson in my lineup than just Lance, especially with the way this team is built with some really junky players. Like you were just saying, like Allen Robinson, I'm never going to ask that question. Do I start him? Zeke, I'm never asking that question. Well, maybe I should, but it's like, I'm never asking that question. I'm going to start him. Brady, I'm going to start him. Like, I want, but I want as many. Well, yeah, it's like I want as many of those players as I can think of that I don't have to worry about, because you've got a lot of roster spots to start every week. Again, granted, one of them is a punter, 2 of them are QBs, but it's like this is the kind of trade I would say is like an all-in for this year. Let's go win it. Let's see what we can do. And then and I mentioned this in my write-up here too, is like I would save trading Watson, because I do think his value is going to go up a little bit more as the season goes on, and you're going to see a rebuilding team show up in week 2 or 3. It starts selling off their win now assets for guys like Watson. You know, they're going to start making moves. And then you're like, all right, great. Now I'm going to capitalize on that move. Because again, Watson, his value is unlikely to go down. And in my book, it's not going to go up much either, but I'd rather hold on and wait until the other team's value to trade for him is different. So again, my trade is built around the league and not the roster and not the players, but like, every league is so different, so it's impossible to build a trade that way. But this one felt like the prime case to bring that up, to be like, know your league, know what they care about. The other thing that I think you hit on perfectly too, Coop, I looked at the waivers on this too, and I said, there's guys on waivers I would easily pick up. Hayden Hurst is on waivers. Pick that guy up. Like you may not want to start him, but pick him up. Pick up Rex Burkhead. Pick up Amir Abdullah. These are players that are going to get points, right? There are people out there that are projecting Rex Burkhead in PPR leagues to get 8 to 10 points a week. I want that guy on my roster in every league I can get him, because he's free. I have him in 7 rosters, I think, at this point, seven teams, because I think he's one of those guys on a bye week or when injuries happen, you can easily throw him in and be like, just give me that 8 to 10 points. I'll take it. It's better than putting all of my chips on Jerick McKinnon for 2 rushing yards. You know what I mean? Like, I'd much rather have a high floor risky dude than a low floor, high ceiling guy on my flex, my 3rd or 4th flex guy. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of work on the waivers that I would do here before I do any trading. But then again, I think sending Lance, I'm not sure that's the smartest move, but I'm sure as hell not sending Mahomes. I'm not sending Pitts. Probably not sending any of those running backs. I don't think you're going to get a lot of value for him. And even DK is your best receiver. You need some help there. And again, I don't think this one trade fixes it. This one trade fixes you. It's not one and done. But I think it sets you up for some more success and gives you some pivot points as the season goes along. So Scott, I guess what were your thoughts on that one? I know you've already said a little bit, but I mean, are you kind of with me on this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally am. I'm fine with anytime you can kind of tear down, and pick up points in your lineup. I mean, ultimately that's what it's all about. But it depends too. Like obviously, Pete said, hey, I did productive struggle and I want to build that way. I mean, you have a young core that's going to grow and get better. And so if you want to be patient, that's fine. Just like Coop said, you don't have to trade anything. You can just chill, see how things play out, go make a couple of waiver moves, see if you can pick up some future picks, put yourself in position that if things are coming together, you can then make that move and go for it, right? Because ultimately all you have to do is see if you're going to be in the running, right? And once you get to the playoffs, anything can happen. Put yourself in position to go either way, whether that's to continue to build a juggernaut for the future, or it's you make a move or two and hey, go for it, man. Go all in.
Yeah. Look for the team, mid-season, right? And that's my take is that you don't need to do that blockbuster now. You could do it later when you're making a push.
Yep.
Like this roster, to me, it doesn't need an overhaul. It just needs a little manscaping, right?
Hey, perfect wrap around on that one. Our sponsor for the show, Manscaped. Use code Junkies at checkout. Get 20% off. You can manscape this roster. I think maybe I was actually talking to Rocky about that. We should definitely have it be sponsored by Manscaped because we're trimming this roster. We're making it nice and shiny. So I think that might be where we go with this in the future.
Trim the Sterling Shepherd, quaff things up with a little Daniel Bellinger, maybe
put that Rex Burkhead lotion on there. You know what I mean?
Jody, open up the boxer shorts, dump a little Jody Fortson powder in there. You know what I mean? And you're good to go.
Well, I think we covered this for you, Pete. Hopefully you got what you needed out of this. Hopefully you can come up with some options. And definitely, if you're listening to this, keep us posted. Hit us up on Twitter. Tag us and stuff. I mean, if you start making some trades, definitely tag us. I know Scott and I love getting that kind of stuff. And Coop obviously would be a fan of it, I'm sure, as well. But tag the Junkies podcast. We love hearing this kind of stuff.
I'm just kidding, dude. Yeah.
Brutal.
I'm just kidding. You could tag me, bro. I need to know now that I've dug deep into this league. I need to know what happens next.
I'll be honest. There are a lot of times we do this and I get a DM like 2, 3, 4 weeks later and someone's like, hey, I made that trade you guys talked about. Here's what I pulled off. And I'm like, hell yeah, great trade. You know what I mean?
Here's what you should start. Here's what I want to see. So we gave at least some waiver moves that need to happen.
Oh yeah.
Within the next week or so, whether you trade or not, I want to see you tag us in a post and say, here's my hashtag Manscaped roster.
Yes.
I want to see I want to see this Manscaped roster.
There we go. Come on,
trim
Pete.
away some of the stuff.
Come on, Pete.
Add some pieces. Yeah, let's get that going.
Make it shiny and new.
Manscaped rosters.
Attract that championship. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's go get shiny and new. I like it. That's exactly right. So again, use that code Junkies at checkout. And I love it. That's terrific. So with that, I think we'll kind of call it a night. I think we've gone on long enough. Rocky would be proud of us. We've gone over an hour at least. That's always the way to go. So I guess, Coop, why don't you start it out here? Where can people find you? What do you got going on? I know you talked about it earlier, but hit us with it again so we can keep up.
Yeah, man. So all my written stuff, you'll find it at fantasyalarm.com. If you follow me on Twitter at Coupe Fiasco, you're going to get, I always tweet everything out. And right now we made everything free this year. I kind of was behind that because I'm such a big Reddit guy, as you know, that I'm like Reddit, they're not gonna sign up. They're not gonna do all this. I'm like, let's give them some free stuff. And if they like it, they'll come in for the DFS stuff. So it's like, we made it all free. I shared it all for free. And then if you like the kind of nonsense I bring, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., that show is a lot of fun. It's a lot of nonsense, but you can also call in, be part of the games, be part of the show. We're giving away, we're talking autographs, bang coats, Donnie Culper.
What's that app again? What do they got to download for that? It's called
Better Sports. So if you go in your app store, Better Sports, BETTOR, like better as in like a gambler. And some of the, we focus on, so our show is mostly, I'm not going to lie to you, it's mostly nonsense. It's, it's whatever we feel like talking about.
That's what you need at that time of the morning.
Yeah, I wake up in the morning, man. I'm cracking up every morning. It's funny. But like some of the other shows, like the one that Nando does, it's all collectibles. And that show is super interesting. They have people on that are serious collectors. Dude, the other day, this guy came on and he's like, you know what you got to go for if you want to get serious? One of one items. And they're like, well, like what? He's like, so things that only one person could possibly have. And he one of the items he has is a legit authentic, and it has like a certificate of authentication. Hugh Hefner, it's like a CVS bottle that says Hugh Hefner Viagra on it, like on the thing. He has a Hugh Hefner Viagra bottle, and he says it's worth like $8,000. Dude. Like he got it like appraised. So it's like these guys are talking. That show is super fun because it's all collectibles, all stuff. Then there's one of the other shows is just all like super sharp betting stuff for anybody that's doing everything. Like I'm talking like they get into tennis. So like whatever you like, it's all on there. So But yeah,
Well, I am signing up. I'm getting logged in and everything while you're talking about it before I forget, because I want to make sure I'm ready to go when I'm at the gym tomorrow morning. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to hopefully win a jersey or something. It'll be great. Very excited about this. So yeah, definitely download Better Sports, Bettor. Listen to Coop in the morning. You got it sounds like a whole plethora of people all throughout the day. Is that right?
It's good, man. It's great. Yeah. And then, the other thing you should do is, if you like the things I said about tight end, I do this not just for tight end, but for other positions too, where the yin yang strategy, we brought it to other positions. If you go to Fantasy Alarm, the free ultimate draft guide has all my rankings. And I do it so Scott, we talked about all the slot receivers. I broke it down into different columns where it's like safe wide receiver 3s versus upside wide receiver 3s. So you can sit there and say, okay, I already have Jarvis Landry as my wide receiver 4. I don't need to be giving myself a brain freeze every week trying to figure out with which slot guy. So it's like you can balance it by drafting upside. So download that. That's free. The ultimate cheat sheet from Fantasy Alarm. That's all I got going on right now, boys.
That's all you got going on. Just two huge, awesome, big things. No big deal.
I've been doing podcast. The thing is, I've been talking. I woke up at 6 this morning, got into the chat at 6:30 to talk about the show. Did that 3-hour show. I've been talking football all day. I could go all night, man. It doesn't matter to me. I'll talk until the
I'm
show.
both
tomorrow,
jealous and I'm really sorry that you had to do this all day. But that sounds rough. No, but appreciate you coming on.
Talking to you, Andrew Hall. That's you
right.
and Scott, man. Like, this is a show I like because we come on and we talk deep leagues with people that actually care. Like, it's so much better than we're in there, boy. So I love coming on this show. Put me back on the schedule. All right.
You're back in the rotation. I'm sure we'll have you on during the season sometime too, because this is obviously we love talking tight ends. You're the tight end whisperer. We know that you got to be on for these kind of shows, and I know our listeners appreciate it too. There's a ton of good nuggets we dropped tonight, so hopefully everybody got a lot of good out of that. Follow us if you would. If you're not already, follow us on the Twitter machine at Dynasty Junkies. You can follow me at Andrew Hall FF. You can follow Scott at Scott_Sidlow. The other two don't get their names shouted out. They're not here. Rocky's going to be editing. It's all his fault if it's something screwed up. I love it. That's
blame them for all errors and omissions.
That's right. That's how it works. Make sure you follow the DAP Network, the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, the DAP Network, if you will. And we do, because Daddy Russ says we have to, and we love him anyway. But, follow that at DAP_network. You can follow us on YouTube. That's where we're going live every Thursday. You get other great podcasts on there, like the Fantasy Timeline, Get Real with Casey Kasem. Oh, I don't know. Trade Addicts is on there too. Maybe you've heard of that. A lot of fun on that one. So make sure you subscribe, rate, review, submit all those different things. We've got lots of Find Mats or Find Me a Trades coming up. I think we're going to be doing a special next week where we do just a bunch of leagues and kind of try to crank through some of those sleepers before the season really gets going. But definitely submit those. If you have a team, if you have a league, go to our Twitter. You can find it on our link trees everywhere, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, you can find me writing at Fantasy Pros throughout the season. I'll be doing a Risers and Fallers column every week and trying to figure out where we can find some values. Not only Dynasty, but redraft as well, and trying to see who's coming and going. But again, obviously, we're going to be here all season long for you, all the way through the offseason. Every day, we never stop here on the Junkies. And Scott, with that, if you want to take us out of here, wrap it up.
Shout out to everybody in the chat. Thanks for coming out and joining us tonight. We love all your input and your feedback, interaction. Good stuff, man. That's why we do this live. It's great. Thanks again, Pete, for the submission. Keep those FMAT submissions coming. Thanks again to Coop. You're the man, brother. We love having you on. Thanks for being an amazing recurring guest. Honestly, one of the best that we have. We've been fortunate enough to have some great people, man. You are definitely up there at the top, man. So we appreciate you so much. And hey, thanks Manscaped for sponsoring this little show that's grown into something pretty special here. So we appreciate everybody listening. Check us out, 20% off with that code Junkies. For Coop A Fiasco, for Andrew Hall FF, I'm at Scott_Sidlow. Junkies out.